Hello, and thank you for joining us for Season 5 for Vermont Film Essentials. My name is David Metzger.
My name is Devon Ewalt.
And we are here to discuss Chinatown, which is one of Devon's favorite films.
Definitely.
So,
Yeah.
let's just get right into it.
Well, my first encounter with the film, I had one of my best friends in the world, Daniel Gillian. We both watched a lot of movies together, and we disappeared down the Jack Nicholson 60s, 70s rabbit hole. And after watching King of Marvin Gardens, Five Easy Pieces, some other films, Easy Rider, we stumbled upon Chinatown. And it's not really one of those movies that is talked about like some of Kubrick's iconic one. You don't really hear about it pop culturally a lot unless you know film. Mm-hmm. And I just remember being floored. I mean, we used to rewind what we would call Nicholson moments. You can sort of see it bubbling to the surface, and then you're like, that's why I like DiCaprio so much, because he does the same thing. Right. You can see it about to happen. I think indignation is what Town called it. He was really good at being indignant.
Yes.
And organically. And I just remember, just the way the film looked and felt, and the music and everything worked upon me. And then I've seen it 10, 12 times now. I just keep coming back to it. It's like that movie for me.
It's weird. I'm ashamed to say, because kind of a similar thing, like my friend and I in high school, the AFI Top 100 list happened, and then we just went, and we were like, this whole summer we're just going to devour as much as possible. And the 70s films, like Cuckoo's Nest was the first one where we watched it and we were like, okay, these are our movies, this is our guy. And just, off topic, but not that much, like the craziest run of films for any actor.
Oh God!
I mean,
Brando wasn't even that good. Brando had duds, and Nicholson had very few.
It was
a very calculated. I'd love to know who his agent was, or if it was just his own kind of. He had the power to. Right. He developed the power to do what he wanted.
Well, and because he started with Corman and everybody,
right,
and Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda, they
and
were all.
He wanted to be a
writer.
writer. For God's sake, he co-wrote Head, and was in it only as I don't think it was really
I think he saw himself as, in the trajectory of I'm going to be a writer and then I'm going to be a director.
Right. It was and such a great way to go about it.
But I mean, even King of Marvin Gardens, obscure as it is a great film.
The reason that's so potent is because they each were supposed to play the other role, because Dern was more Nicholson was more the animated one,
right, and
Dern was a little what reason he's so great in Nebraska. He's so good at being quiet and seeing things seething under the surface, and it was so great to see Dern come alive in that movie and be so dynamic, and Nicholson so understated. You're just waiting for him to. But the indignation is there too. It's microscopic,
right? And
you're just waiting. There's a scene where he's standing in the corner. He's like, "Open your eyes, open your ears," and you're just waiting. You're just so when it happens, you're like, "What did I just witness? This is erupted out of this human."
I just there's Easy Rider, and you see Easy Rider, and all of a sudden Easy Rider's going along. It's one of my favorite movies, but it's going along, and then all of a sudden he shows up, and you're just you're fully formed.
You're transported into another. Really, that's him arriving.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yes.
Because everything up to that point was he really hadn't taken put teeth into a scene yet. It was all it's Corman kind of fluff B movie fun, but nothing of substance, really.
And then we saw Five Easy Pieces, and then The Last Detail, I could have, the first time I watched The Last Detail, I could have watched him yell at the bartender, just over and over again.
Yeah.
And it just meant, at that time, at that age, that meant so much to me. And then we saw Chinatown, and it's the only thing I knew about Chinatown was that everyone said, it's the screenplay, Titan. And I'm watching it, and I'm I know that I should love this movie, but there's something I had such a hard time getting into it. And it's not that I like looked at it and was like, oh, it's not that great.
Right.
Like I knew that it was great. It was just something about like me and watching it.
Right.
And then in college, like just about the time I was about to graduate, and I'm getting my degree project done. I watch it and I sit down and it hit me for the first time because for some reason in that viewing I was watching it for Faye Dunaway because I loved her so much.
Had you seen Network yet?
Yeah.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah, that and Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, yeah.
And like I watched it from her perspective, and then the end of the film happened and I'm like, wow, like there is so
And apparently
much.
Jane Fonda was considered for the role, and Polanski really wanted Dunaway. It might have been Robert Towne too.
She is so, and I don't know if it was in the script or not, but there's so many little things that she does, like something, like even the way she dresses, the way she wears her makeup and does her hair and everything, like everything is there to hide all the collapse that's happening inside of her.
You know, she shows vulnerability very well, and not in a theatrical way, but in a very organic way. And I thought that there was a certain nobility, dignity, and morality to her secrecy and deception. You know, which is such the opposite of a femme fatale, because she's being introduced. It employs film noir techniques in a way that is very strategic, because it actually plays them against themselves. I mean, it's really cool because you think you're getting this, and it's like really she's honestly the most respectable person in the film.
And so tragic.
Oh God!
And like you said, like the direct opposite of a femme fatale, because as you're watching the movie, you're like, oh, she's got something up her sleeve, like she's gonna be the bad guy. And then
Polanski, I guess, fought for that tragic ending because Evans wanted Cross to die, and he wanted Evelyn to live. And I think the original Robert Towne ending was that Cross dies, Evelyn goes to jail, and Nicholson has to live with the secret. And then he ended, and there's this great quote from Polanski where he says, this can't be, paraphrasing, but can't be like every other mystery. It has to be, this will be what sets it apart. In the final scene, we need to see her die.
Right. And and I've got to assume, and this is like, it's one of those great director-writer trade-offs, because Towne was very, like, he didn't like the ending.
Right.
He didn't like that it went that way.
He later admitted
that he was
which is great, which just shows the kind of quality human being he was, that he would be like, oh no, you're right, that mine was too literary, this needed,
Well, and I've got to assume that Polanski, after going through the tragedy that he had just gone through.
My God, I can't imagine. I just can't. And the fact that you read that the strength of the script is what got him to do it really is a testament to Towne. I mean, and it's just great that Towne and Nicholson wanted to work together, and Nicholson and Polanski wanted to work together, and so that's how it all came together. And I read that Evans originally was going to pay Towne $175,000 to do Great Gatsby, but that Towne didn't. He's like, he thought about it and he's like, I can't improve upon this with, and it's like, just pay me $25,000 and I'll write my own screenplay. And here it is.
I mean, I guess that's a great segue to talk about the screenplay, because it's just so, it has so many levels to it that I would think you'd have to be cooking this up for like 10 years to just
remarkable.
Have.
Was it last up? I don't know if I talked about how I thought Casablanca was the best screenplay. But last up, but it was like, that would almost just be the most classical one. Like, this might be the best. I don't know. It's up there. It's got to be top 5.
Well, and because here's the thing, it's one of those films, and film noir and detective stories are great at doing this. Like, I would also put something like Blue Velvet up with it.
Well, that's a mystery. It definitely has it,
It has the same type of story where like you have your hero who, he's got this lead, he's going to follow it through the end.
And we almost don't know how messed up they both, like him especially, like until that stuff starts to happen, and you're like, well, Dennis Hopper's messed up, but he's kind of like, he's not,
But the story, like, you know, on the surface, there's this very classical Hollywood genre,
Right.
conventional storytelling going on. But in the subtext, underneath it, there's this crazy artistic expression that's happening. And that those two things are interwoven so delicately and work so well together.
Well, I think that a lot of it stems from Polanski's real because the script is incredible, but it's like you said, the collaboration between these two and their shared sensibility that brought it to fruition.
Yeah.
Because there's just a respect for, I think Town was inspired by an article that I now want to read called Raymond Chandler's L.A. and also what was going on with the water.
Yep.
Right. And so I just, you know, I thought it was really interesting the way it's shot from Giddy's perspective to the point where when he loses consciousness, we lose consciousness, we come back. Yep. And I didn't realize this until I read it, but that Giddy's is in every scene of the film. There's not a film noir that I don't know if that existed before
that truly does that,
right,
and can carry it
that
out
makes
like
it
that.
from one perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just truly, we receive the information. And actually, I guess there was a voiceover that in the original screenplay that Giddy's had a voiceover throughout the film. And Polanski was like, no, I want the audience to learn information as Giddy's learns it, which just makes you right in the...
And there's like the way that they do that too, because, you know, you would think, like, let's take the situation where he drives up, he's watching the guy, and then he takes the two watches.
Right. Oh,
right?
God.
So
it's brilliant.
So at first you're just like, what the hell is he doing?
Well, no, first it's like, why does he have
30
watches? No, like 30 watches in the glove compartment.
In the glove compartment.
He's like, why does he have so many watches? Yeah.
And you would think, like, in the voiceover would be like, oh, and so now I'm going to go into my glove.
Yeah, thank God those things were left to mystery. Like, voiceovers can be real killers. Like, they can be employed well in a classical storytelling sense, but they sure as hell can be limiting and lazy.
Especially in this type of, like, the classic example is Blade Runner, right? Where, you know, there's this voiceover, but you watch it and you're just like, well, it just explains what.
There's a sense of wonder that's Bergman-esque. I never thought about it, but actually thinking about, like, how the information is conveyed, it's really kind of the way Bergman gives you a film. Yeah. I mean, you're not spoon-fed. It's reliant on strong imagery. I mean...
And that, you know, that director-writer handoff, it's like, you know, I'm sure in Robert Towne's scripts it doesn't say this film is going to be shot anamorphically.
Right.
I'm sure it doesn't say, you know, the musical score is going to be trumpet. You know, it doesn't say we're going to see everything.
Which, by the way, was recorded in 9-10 days.
I guess there was some, I still don't know who it is, but it was some composer that was going to do it. And either he got fired or he couldn't.
It's funny because Towne said he couldn't remember who it was, right. And it's in Wikipedia, and I forget the name exactly, but it does list it in there if you're interested in it, because he apparently, Evans, got rid of it at the last minute. And I really respect how much people fought for the sanctity of this film. It was William Fraker was originally going to be the cinematographer, which they had worked together, Polanski and him, on Rosemary's Baby, and no one had consulted Evans. And he was like, I don't want this to be, he didn't want it to be like a unfair kind of, they're in tandem together, so they can work again. Because already, if you look at the editor, there's like there's at least 3 other people that worked on Rosemary's Baby specifically. The editor,
costume designer, and the art director. Like they were.
By the way, the costume design. How often does that really come up as a, you know, or do you remember to say it? Because it's like, it goes beyond being period accurate.
Well, it's just like like a style
Nicholson's
unto
suits
itself.
In that movie are I'm like, where can I get these suits? Please show me where I can find these, because and you know what, it goes along with how he smokes a cigarette, or how this goes, and what Faye Dunaway's wearing, and how it informs her character, what Noah Cross is wearing. Mulray, it really defines. There's so much thought that's put into who's wearing what.
Right, and why.
Right. Oh.
And like Nicholson has said that like he learned everything about style and about what he wanted to wear and how
he directed the two Jakes. And you know, I actually want to revisit that because I know it got critically panned and I wasn't crazy about it, but it'd be interesting to kind of,
it's got to be just because it's, you know, a
how
sequel
do you,
to this.
Right,
It's like,
and that's why they scrapped the third one, because it was originally supposed to be a trilogy.
Do you know that we were talking last week about Who Framed Roger Rabbit and about how that was, you know, influenced by Chinatown, that he saw, because Who Framed Roger Rabbit is about the building of the highway, right? That he wanted the third one to be that.
So basically that's like trying to make the third Chinatown, but through this weird mashup. That's so cool. God, that's awesome. You know what I like is how from the first scene, as soon as you hear, I guess it's during the opening credits, the music, as soon as you hear the music, a very specific atmosphere is created, and you are in it. And then it fluctuates throughout, whether he wants you to feel tension with that dun dun, dun with the piano or the trumpets. It all is so mood oriented that it's just masterful. I mean,
and it's just so like it's so somber and like, and you think like at first you're like, wow, like the trumpet has like this very almost like this, it has like this nostalgic quality first, and you're like, oh, that's what it is. It's because it's nostalgic, and you want to go back to this time. But it gets sinister in ways that you don't expect. And it gets very tragic and sad.
Did you hear what Goldsmith said to the trumpet player? He said, I want it to be sexy, but not like it's good sex. It's like, it's just amazing, that kind of like specificity, because then it's like, oh, okay,
got it.
Let me tweak this. And yeah.
Something about Nicholson that I just wanted to bring up, because there's the, you know, we're talking about Jack Nicholson moments. There's the scene in the barbershop.
Oh, God.
But he has such a, like, I love the idea of a character who is, he's so arrogant in assuming that he's going to be 2 steps ahead. Like, he knows everything. He knows everything before it's going to happen. He's going to pull the wool over the eyes of everyone that's, you know, he's going to be better than the police officers. He's going to be better than the people that are hiring him. And then to bring him to a moment where it's like, I had no idea the depth and the horrific implications of what I just got myself into.
I mean, he gets his nose sliced. He gets shot at. He gets beaten with a crutch, which he's, it's like, I love his, I just love his just like kind of own sense of righteousness. Which when it gets violated, as an actor, that always spoke to me, and it fueled my, anytime I had to react to something that I stood up, that was like I felt strongly about, or that my character felt strongly about, because he's a master of it.
Right,
I mean,
and that's got to be because he's a writer as well, because he knows, like that scene in the barbershop is like him saying, like, you know, no one, you know, say what you want about anything. Don't you dare say that I'm a fool. Don't you dare say that what I am doing,
or that I would take advantage of anyone or try to do harm to anyone. I mean, he's not over his own past.
Right.
And that's honestly why I think he can't fully find what the truth, or why it's so hard for him, is because he's still not over Chinatown. It's, you know, it's just like, that's the reason it's called that. And it's not called Giddy's, or it's not called, you know, even though it's following him, because what it's really it's unearthing this great tragedy, which is honestly, you know, the evil that exists in the corruption of human dignity. I mean, and it's emblemized by the rape of Evelyn Mulray, but it's, you know, it's what they're doing, how people are just like treating other people, and it, you know, it's
all going on underneath like right underneath our eyes, right underneath our noses. And that's why it's just so great that it's like the perfect vehicle, the perfect vessel, the perfect genre for this story.
I mean, it tackles so much. How is it possible that this film exists? In all aspects. There's a reason it was nominated for 11 Oscars, right? And the fact that it only won one shows why the screenplay is the hub of its many spokes.
Right.
I can't understand how they're able to have this socially conscious, because it's sort of like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, where the film brought awareness to things that were still going on.
It's one of my favorite things. Like as a filmmaker, like I remember, especially as a young filmmaker, like I had such a hard time owning genre. Like I think most young filmmakers, they think like, oh, that's generic, that's conventional. I don't want to do anything like that. I want my films to set apart. But it's such a great tool and such a great vessel for whatever story you want to tell. Like think about, like nowadays, if there was a filmmaker that wanted to make a movie about, oh, I have this like really dark, deep secret in my family past about, my grandmother or whatever, being raped and, having to, the sister is the daughter and it's all this crazy stuff. They'd turn it into like, this indie family drama, and then they sit there and they wonder, why isn't anybody seeing my sad, emotionally devastating indie drama? But then Robert Towne has, this dark thing that he wants to get out there. How am I going to do that? I'm going to tell it through a film noir. And people are going to go see the film noir, but then they're going to get sucker punched by this crazy revelation.
And I don't know if it was conscious or not, but Towne and Nicholson were friends, and about how Nicholson, the woman that he thought was his mother, was actually his sister,
right? And
it traumatized him. And from what I hear, there are rumors that the slaps in that scene with Dunaway are real, because it brought up so much in him of indignation, of still not being over this moment in his life,
right?
It's just, I mean, I don't know. In The Misfits, there's a scene where Montgomery Clift is on the phone, and John Huston decided to include moments of Clift's own life. He talks about recovering from the accident, and I just wonder, what was that, so it could hit close to home,
right,
for someone that he knew would respond in a way that was visceral and raw,
And especially for, that scene, it's the same self-righteousness that's in the scene in the barbershop. But instead of him dominating it and, getting the upper hand, he completely loses it.
That's his most helpless moment in the film.
Absolutely. And he just like, again, it's like, you're not going to make a fool out of me. You're not going to make what I do anything other than being honest. Just tell me the truth.
Right.
And then she does, and he's as devastated as she should be, but she's not, because in that moment when she does finally reveal it, it's like now
and she still is like, maintains the veneer of that she has it together, because she says, "Do you get it now, or is it too tough for you?"
Right.
Right. Wow, this woman is amazing, and that's what almost makes it like Evelyn Maury's film. As much as Giddy's is it's like Great Gatsby. How there's someone we experience the events of the film through,
right?
But it's really not about him.
Yeah.
It's about what was done to her and how that was never rectified, and of what this man did to everyone. Noah Cross is someone you could write an essay on alone, because he represents. So he's perhaps the most incorrigibly evil, makes my skin crawl villain in any film ever. I can't remember anyone that I cringed more. And when he goes, oh,
Right.
oh God, it makes me sick.
Yeah. And the way Houston plays it, like,
and that one line exchange, I hope you don't mind, I leave the head on.
Right.
And he goes, well, just don't do it with chicken. And it was like so good. Oh man. That scene is incredible.
That's an incredible scene, especially because it is the first time we meet him, right? And like you only, it's the Orson Welles rule. It's like you hear about him, and then boom.
Yeah.
But the whole build-up about like the drive up to the house, and Goldsmith's score at that moment is like it's one of the most sinister scores, and it's like driving up to Dracula's castle. Like you're just
the scenes where there's many times I was reminded of Hitchcock in this when she asks if is this a business with you or is it an obsession? It reminded me of Vertigo.
Yep.
And then when he's driving through the cornfield, it reminded me of North by Northwest, and just getting too far into something that you shouldn't be like.
Right, and and those scenes when he's driving because we're behind Gittes and we're seeing the windshield and we're seeing what he's driving. And that's straight out of Vertigo.
Right.
And then like there's also like these little things where like at the beginning when he's snooping around, he's on the roof. And then he makes a move, and something falls, and then like that whole thing.
Yeah, you know what I noticed is there's so it's interesting in the commentary they talk about how there's like one intact thing and one broken one, and that throughout the film.
Yeah.
Right, glasses. What I noticed was there's all these images seen on glass surfaces, whether it's the camera lens. On his camera lens, you're seeing what's going on down there. There's multiple parts in the film where you see something that is a false image, and it's just very brilliantly symbolized for us.
That dual object thing that Fincher talks about in the commentary is. Like that blew my mind, and it's one
which wasn't even intentional. Town said,
and
which is just amazing.
And you say this all the time. Like it's like there's this thing that I noticed that there's no way they did not do this intentionally, and I really wonder like if Town is just like well I'm not.
And I don't think it takes away the mysticism and the wonder from it.
No,
if it's not.
No,
because the fact that ended up being a running motif is amazing, regardless of intention or deliberateness.
But it's just so ever present everywhere that it's like, well, someone had to know.
Right. I mean, there's like 7 of them, right? He was listing them off.
Yeah, he's like, so it's you could take it as far as the one nostril,
the iris, the imperfection in the iris. I mean, it's just amazing.
2 watches.
That's just great writing. I mean, because it's not just as Town have just a supreme knack for dialogue and how people actually talk to each other, and having each character sound like their character. You know how some lazy screenwriters have everyone sounds the same?
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, like there's no variation to how people talk. It's how he writes his setups. He's very good from scene. It's like the Noah Cross eating scene. Fincher says, how many pages was this? It's like 3. He goes, no, more like 5 or 6. It's like 5 or 6 pages, that one scene.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like, right? But there's so much. It's the shared love of detail between Town and Polanski. I mean, there's a story I read in Dance Macabre by Stephen King, just a phenomenal book about the horror genre. Ira Levin talks about how Polanski woke him up in the middle of the night about Rosemary's Baby and said, hey, I needed to know like the color of the carpet in this apartment. Like, I don't know if you specified what was the color in this apartment. He's like, geez, Roman. He's like, whatever it was, and that's the Tarkovsky thing. His color matters. It is very important. There is a truth that is there beneath each color.
And there's a like just talking about the color, like this versus Rosemary's Baby, like they're so different photographically, in art direction and everything. but it's still that same level of detail. And there's like the color scheme of this film, like you know, there's a lot of browns, there's a lot of blacks.
Now, when you
It's
see
like
the
this-
grass, when you walk into that back veranda or the backyard, I mean, it's like, it's shot in such a way that, I mean, the cinematography in this is just beyond good. It's
I think it's one of the most beautiful widescreen 235
yeah
films.
Not
ever.
only is every shot just filled with painstaking detail, but they look like paintings. They're so well framed. It's incredible.
The even like throwaway scenes like them on the boat when they're, you know, just that.
But the thing is, the other guy, he does something that gets Nicholson to like slyly like smile when
Right.
he throws a cigarette. Like, it's just like, I don't know. That informed the viewer of their friendship. You know, just a little character stuff. You know,
And I love the way there's just a cadence to the way Nicholson says things. Like, it's like, you know, this job requires a little bit of finesse.
that's one of my favorite lines. You know, you're dumber than I think you think I think you are. God, I mean, the thing is, he wrote the character
Yeah.
with Nicholson in mind.
Yep.
So anytime that happens, you're going to knock it out of the park because you know who you're working with. You know.
I know what they did. They wrote you a letter, but then you'd have to learn how to read.
Well, his comebacks are incredible, and I love asking the guy. He calls the guy a weasel. I wonder if that was an improv. When he calls the lending lab, when the guy says it's not a lending,
right.
the Hall of Records guy, a weasel. It just felt like he's like a weasel, you know. But the whole rip, it's just classic. I mean, he does the head. That's another of the one, the one on, one off. It's the headlight. I mean, how many tricks of the trade does this guy have? He's like one of the most resourceful private eyes there is.
Right.
I mean,
and you buy it because you know he was a police officer, so he had to have a lot of training and a lot of stuff that he could fall back on. He's not your average private eye.
you know, I think you could make a whole. I know there. We talked about Rio Bravo last week. There's the book that's about what dude's character was like before his fall from grace.
Yeah.
I feel like you could do a similar thing with China. Like, let's see what that part of was like.
And I love that it's still, you know, even as much as he describes it and tells her the story, like there's still a lot of ambiguity there.
Where's the Chinatown prequel? Like, I want a filmmaker to make this thing, and it could be so great, and Nicholson could be in it as Jake, and you have but like as a later one, talking about, like, if you want to do it that way. I don't know. I just think that I really want to know what happened, because it's intimated, and that's honestly, who knows? That's the power of storytelling, is how little you say about something sometimes really fills it with the wonder that you feel about that time. It's like, I don't know. I kind of know.
I can piece some things together.
Right.
But then like, you know, and that's what makes it special to anyone.
Town knew what he was doing. I mean, there's no. One thing that I thought was cool is, so this is set in 1937, right?
Yep.
It's the year Jack Nicholson was born. So you're doing this movie, and you're getting to be this guy in this time, and it's the year you came into being. Like, that's just kind of cool. I just think who knows if it was even a conscious thought. It might have been, of just the idea of like, oh wow, I get to like be in this time.
Right.
When I came into the world as this person,
In the world of this film, I could drive
like
to a
see
hospital
LA,
and see myself being born. I had a thought and it went away.
Yeah.
Let's talk about 70s cinema.
Sure.
Because
this sets
it.
itself apart from other 70s cinema in a way. Because one of the reasons I love 70s cinema is because it feels kind of freewheeling, and like it's going to do whatever it wants to do.
Yep.
And there's a celebration of time of what came before it, but also a kind of like rigorous breaking free from conventional filmmaking.
Yeah.
You know, and this was like a highly skilled surgeon. Like, there's something about this that's different to me than Altman, Scorsese. Maybe it's, they all did it in a different way, right? They all did that in a different way. It's just something about Polanski was akin to like, just, you know, I don't know.
And I think one is it's the period, right? Because it's not like The Long Goodbye where he's like, I'm gonna take it into the 70s.
Right.
And that way there I can surround it with all the things that we know.
Another great LA film.
Right.
I mean.
And different. Like he is quoted, Robert Altman is quoted as saying is like, you know, the audience didn't want to go for it because it wasn't Humphrey Bogart.
And that was a year before Chinatown.
Right.
So the fact that these came out back to back. Well, that's what was so cool about, yeah, I mean, Long Goodbye, he just embraces, he really, it's the same thing he did with McCabe and Mrs. Miller. He has respect for the conventional boundaries of a Western, but he's like, I'm going to turn it on its head.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't care. I'm going to.
I think that this, and because I love McCabe and Mrs. Miller,
Yeah.
and I think it's one of like, again, what I have come to realize that I love about the 70s is that these filmmakers looked to films that they liked. Filmmakers that they liked.
More
and
people
said,
should do this.
I'm going to do it my way.
Right.
And it's going to be like, you know, with Polanski, it's like, I'm going to give you all the style. I'm going to give you all the style. You know, you're going to wish it was in black and white, but I'm going to use the technology of the time to make it.
And that's what should happen more than a movie like Vantage Point, where they're like, let's do a cheap ripoff of Rashomon. It's like, no.
Right.
Like, watch Rashomon a bunch and then think about how you could, sort of like Usual Suspects, would paid homage to Rashomon. You do something that, the way De Palma made a career out of interpreting Hitchcock through a love of B-movies. Right. But like putting this kind of like real like fine glossy finish on a B movie, you know, it's just, yeah, that's the way, that's how it should, people should go about it.
And I think that is one of the things that I think like if like any filmmaker out there should just, that should be the lesson, is like how do you like, and I think you know, I think it's what I loved so much about Get Out, Jordan Peele. Like I think he had this thing that he wanted to say,
right?
This really prescient thing, this important thing, and he found the right vessel to put it in.
That's how you get someone to listen to what you're saying most effectively, is to not get on a soapbox and say, this is what this movie's about. No, the great ones, Kubrick, people who really wanted to get a message across, you embed it in something that you don't realize is what you want to wrap it in. That's what's so great about fiction. It's not, that's the thing. People think fiction is escapism, and sure, that's part of it. But there's a whole lot of it that is concealing the truth within a narrative that, oh, wow, this is what this is about. I can take things from this. This is real. This is actually what's going on. It has been going on. I mean, that's what made Jordan Peele's film so powerful.
Yeah. And I never thought of it that way, right? You know, with this movie, it's like, you know, underneath it all, underneath that widescreen frame, underneath all of the colors and everything, you know, underneath, quite frankly, underneath Jack Nicholson, like that is what I think makes this a quintessential 70s film, is that it's him.
It's hard to not just watch what Nicholson is doing in a scene. It's like Brando. They are the two goats for me, with Nicholson just a little bit higher, in my opinion.
Because there's too many things that he does that no one else would do. Like
it's like they talked about in the commentary when they pretend to when they go to the nursing home.
Yeah.
And Towne says, this is a scene that any other actor would have just butchered.
Right.
And Nicholson makes it funny.
Yeah.
Because of how he interprets it.
Or like, and some other actor would try to be funny.
Right, right.
But he just, you know, he just is the way he is.
God.
And it's like, you know, and there's like that little moment where he's just like, you know, that's exactly what I wanted you to say.
I have I went to AMDA. I had a scene study teacher there who was in Blood and Wine.
Yeah.
And has one scene, this guy Dan Daly. And he said, first of all, that Nicholson is like the coolest guy, and like he didn't need to be there because he wasn't necessarily, they were doing cutaways for their dialogue in this one exchange.
Yeah.
And Nicholson was like, no, I want him to be actually talking to me, so I'm gonna stay late and be here even though I'm not on screen. That's like,
thank God. Like,
man, like someone like that.
Those are the types of stories. Like there's a backstory to A Few Good Men where Rob Reiner tells it, where like, you know, they're at the table read, and they get to his first line, which is is PFC Williams,
right.
And he's like, he said it the way he said it in the movie at the table read, and every actor at the table went, "Oh, okay, we're going for this." And then when they're doing the, you know, You Can't Handle the Truth scene, like he's doing it the same way. They're just on Tom Cruise's side, and he's doing it like he's really letting him have it. He's giving like a, you know, Oscar-winning performance.
I did the same thing for the most recent play I did, Moon for the Misbegotten. O'Neill. Like at the table read, I like when there's parts that I did everything, and it was sort of like this sort of like jarring. Like people weren't like, why is he talking like? It's like, what do you mean? I just couldn't understand. Why wouldn't you do it like this? You know what I mean?
Well, and his thing, like, because Rob Reiner stops and he's like, hey, Jack, why don't you save some for your side?
Yeah.
And he's like, you don't understand. I love to act, and I don't get scripts like this every day.
Yeah.
So I'm going to milk it for everything I got.
You know, another thing my teacher told me is that he wanted everyone to be in the moment, right? And so he would like, sometimes during a take, he would, or right before a take, he would just like he would like let out like a yell or something, and just like, so that people were in that moment, and then they would yell, go action, and then it was like, oh, we're in this moment. We're not in some archive of our brain, you know? And that's one thing I'm just so astonished by, and it's honestly from the very first scene, you notice how immediate his thoughts and expressions are. He's so locked in that room. He's so just in there. Like, I don't know what it's just something about, well, that's different than other actors. Where like, you feel that he is in that moment, truly. Like,
well, and Fincher talks about this too. It's like, you know, because everyone kind of gives him a hard time for doing like all these takes, and he's like, you know, when someone goes to open up a window, I want it to feel like they've opened that window their whole life, and they know the way that they have to open up that window.
Right.
They can do it just, you know, they don't even have to think about it. They just do it. And Nicholson has that same thing where it's just like, you know, you feel like he's been in that chair forever.
Well, what about that one take of him climbing that fence during the flood? They talk about how physically dexterous he was, and it's like there's not a lot of actors you're working with that are gonna, like, I think Fincher said, yeah, try. You ever tried climbing a fence in a suit?
In a suit,
like that quickly, you know?
Floor slime shoe.
Yeah.
A couple moments that I was thinking of in that opening scene. So. Not with Burt Young, right? So he leaves, and then the woman comes in, and he's just like, my husband's fooling around, and he's just like, no, really? Like just like that moment of just like, here we go again, and
well, and those parts are funny.
Yeah,
there are a lot of, you know, we were talking earlier before the show about, oh, this is a sad movie, and yes, it is tragic, but there's a lot of humor.
There's a lot of humor.
And a lot of it has to do with Nicholson.
Yes. And you know, and thank God, because it would have, you know, if it was just a sad, tragic movie, you know, it would be just that. But that's the thing, man. It's just like, you know, it's taking a film, it's taking The Big Sleep and saying, well, this is that with Jack Nicholson at the center of it.
Right.
And you get so much subtlety with him.
You know what's great is, it's like clearly this guy is, it's like he's like a charming guy. He makes everything look so cool. For God's sake, when he's wearing the bandage on his nose, he's still the coolest guy in the room. How many people can pull that off,
Right.
okay? But there's moments where you realize that he knows it's all BS. Like, when he's casually leaning, smoking a cigarette on those rocks. And when the water, like, and the water starts coming through, and he like looks, you know what I mean? Or he's just like, he's reading the newspaper, and then they say Mulray's name, and he looks like, there's just these moments where the cool and the calm is punctured, and his moments are just so great and revealing. I love when the first time there's profanity in the film. He says, "Shut the f up." he says, "Shut the," and God, that scene is so great. There might even be a camera move that's timed with it.
Yeah, there's a couple moments. Like, there's also the moment where when he first sits down with who he thinks is Evelyn Mulray, and he pulls the chair up and sits down, and he like lands right into a close-up, and it almost seems like the camera has moved with it, like almost like he's pulled the camera.
This film, looking at what it was up against, Godfather 2.
Yeah.
Art Carney, he won. Obviously, I still haven't seen Harry and Tonto, but I hear it's amazing. And that was sort of like a swan song type thing.
Right.
Oscar.
Right.
So Nicholson, I think, clearly deserved it, even more than Pacino.
Yeah. This is one of those, like, there's Oscar years where you're like, how in the heck did that win over that?
Right.
And then there's years like this where it's like, okay, it's Godfather Part 2.
Right.
But then you're like, yeah, but it's Chinatown. Like, it's a very...
Right. And it becomes apples and oranges at that point.
Yes.
But I just think, Fincher thinks this is Nicholson's best work, period. And I don't know if I would disagree, to be honest. It's iconic. And that's saying a lot, considering The Shining. Look at the guy's iconic work.
Right.
There's just a truth to it. There's a whole world that is created by the filmmakers, and he has created an entire world of his character.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
And just another moment where this is just kind of like a writer thing.
Yeah.
But the moment where he's telling her the story and she says, "Cherchez la femme," and that he just gives her a look, and she just knows, oh, you don't know what I just said. And I really like that. I really like that there is just like this one little subtle moment where it's like he just does not understand something that she is saying, and it's almost like a foreshadow as to what's going to happen. But that also, like, he's finally unburdening like this past hurt that is driving his character, and she can just, with one little clever phrase, just get to the heart of it, and he doesn't understand that. I just love that little moment.
They've got crazy chemistry too. It's just awesome.
The whole, like, I think Fincher mentions this too, but it's like, the slitting of the nose, which that we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But that it pays off so many different things, and one of them is that
the first tender moment between
them, the first intimate moment between them that leads to them getting together.
She didn't realize it was such a nasty cut, and just this, and he's disarmed, and you really get to see this guy's a good guy, which is a departure from, I feel like, some film noirs, because who you're dealing with is sort of morally ambiguous. Sometimes it's like, I don't know. You don't get a lot of just like.
You get the sense that Bogart has done some really sinister stuff.
Right. The Richard Widmark, a lot of these guys, they just their characters just, it feels like they kind of are in that world, and they've had to do this, and they've had to do, and then again, we still don't know about that past.
Right.
really.
Right.
Did he ever have to morally compromise himself? I mean, you've got Mulray, who talks about his first mistake. You know, his he doesn't want to make the same mistake twice, and so you've got this sort of built-in regret with that character of, which was based on truth about this disaster that of the character he was based on. So it's like I feel like a lot of this film has to do with regret and pain, and the sense of loss, and of never being able to recapture innocence, especially for Evelyn.
Right. And there's also like this thing, like every time I watch the ending of this movie, it's like, so he gets this revelation from her and he understands, and he's like, okay, I got to help her. And he sets up these things for her to get away. And all he has to do is just leave with her. And he could do it, and it's so simple. And every time I watch the movie, I'm like, oh man, like there's the moment.
Yeah.
There's the moment where you just couldn't let it go. And you had to go back and see Noah Cross, didn't you? You had to shove it in his face that I know what you've done. You had to be the hero. And maybe that informs what happened.
She tells him, my father is a very dangerous man.
Yeah.
And I don't think she was just, it wasn't just, you know, she wasn't just being rhetorical.
It is one of those, like, it sounds like a cliche, but it's like you don't know who you're dealing with.
Right. And he has that line.
Yeah.
He says, if you think you know what's going on, let me tell you, you know, it's like, I love how malevolent that line is. It's like, oh boy, we got, you know, speaking of the nose trick, so apparently it was done with a, like sort of like a trick knife, but it's but if Polanski hadn't done it the right way, it could have actually cut him, which is just so, it's like, shows a lot of the trust, first of all, like the, you know, the chutzpah, for lack of a better word, of Nicholson, that he's just going to be like, you know what, let's do it.
Right.
You know, I mean,
he would be the actor to be like, yeah, sure. And it's like, if you cut my nose, you cut my nose.
I mean, what is it, Foxcatcher, that, what's, Channing Tatum.
Yeah,
he wanted to do it too.
Yeah.
You talk about Sheen and Apocalypse Now, it's like, the really great ones are so, the reason they do this is because it tests their mettle, and they really want to feel, it helps them feel that sense of the character.
And I do think it is like, it's one part the material, one part that they know that they're with the right director. Like they wouldn't, like I don't think Nicholson would have done that just for anybody. And those are the types of things, it's like where it's like, you know, that behind the scenes they were all making the same film.
Do you think you could call Chinatown a perfect film?
I was thinking about it leading up to this discussion.
I can't think of a flaw.
I
don't
really
think there's
can't.
one moment I thought that could have been done better. I could take or leave that.
Well, because any flaw that you could bring up is all up to the viewer. It's like if you think a movie shouldn't have a downbeat ending, then okay, that's a flaw.
Right.
But it's not really a flaw.
I just think Polanski has already thought about everything so much already that there's no, it's pretty much all calculated. There's nothing that he hasn't thought of the best way to do something, you know? I mean, he made, even with Town's great screenplay, for God's sake, Polanski's like, no, she needs to die.
Right.
And I'm going to rewrite the scene. And I guess Evans and him split, like, just stopped talking to each other at that point. And he rewrote the scene, and they shot it. You know? I mean, wow.
And it has to be because, and this is another thing that that is a quintessentially 70s ending. And
I know Bonnie and Clyde's not a 70s film, but obviously that is historical fact.
I think, like, when I say 70s films, I think it starts with 67.
Yeah.
It starts with them.
Yep, because it started to change. The whole sentiment, filmmaking sentiment started to change.
It's like, we can go down a different road. It doesn't have to end up roses.
Right. Point Blank is actually one of my favorites of that started to take risks in storytelling.
But and it has to be with him saying, like, you know, I'm not going for the Hollywood BS. I'm not going for everything being
great.
wrapped in a
Well, apparently
box.
Evans wanted Polanski because of his European perspective on America would be a little darker and more cynical, which I think was an incredible move because it really exposed the seediness, the true nature of what was going on in this town underneath all of the, showbiz and sunshine and all that.
And that, that perfectly ties into all the seediness that's going on in the 70s. I mean, it's a good movie for now. Like that's the thing. It's like a director coming in and saying, like, no, I know how things are. I'm not going to fall for it. You're doing a disservice to this film if you end it any other way but this.
People will remember it more if it doesn't end well.
And
we feel it more. We say, wait, that's not right.
Yeah.
I mean, God, for God's sake, the shot of, first of all, as a storytelling mechanism, the fact that we know she's way down that shot, in that shot.
Right.
That car is way down there. The fact that we know she's been shot in the head because of the car horn is just brilliant.
Yep.
And when you see, I don't think anyone, even with the nose slice, it wasn't done in a garish Cronenberg-esque way.
Right.
Like that eyeball, when we just see a gaping hole where her eye was, my God, that just, you can't unsee that. It's forever impressed upon your mind. It's,
And I hate when I say something like this because it feels like I'm an old man saying it, but like that's how I think violence should be shown, when it's not like, hey, look at this cool effect that I'm going to do when I'll see the skin of the nose being like I feel like, and I hate for doing this because I do like him as a director, but Guillermo del Toro, when he does violence, I feel like he's just like, oh, I love violence, but he's doing it in a way of, it's like, no, violence is really, it's an awful thing, and just by doing that, you see how awful it is.
And the fact that we have to live with the after effects of that with him throughout the whole rest of that part of the film.
Not only is it like, the next shot of him with the thing on his, and him looking just so ticked off, it's an immediate laugh, just because it's him.
One of the best lines of all time is, "I almost lost my nose, and I like it. I like breathing through it." He doesn't over deliver that line, and I really get annoyed when people are like, "Oh, it's a Jack moment," or "Oh, here's Jack going all over the top." It's like, no, actually, he undersells a whole lot of things and gives them the weight that they need.
Yes.
And as he got older, yes, certain roles required him to be over the top. The Joker, how do you play that? The Joker's an over-the-top character, at least the way it was interpreted by himself,
all the debates that go on about The Shining and him being over the top in that, seeing that movie on the big screen, his performance is like, you see how calculating it is and showing, like, no, this is what domestic violence looks like. This is what an abusive husband is like. This is what an abusive father is like. And it sends like shivers down your spine when you're watching it on that big screen. You see his, like that big overacting, as they call it. Like it doesn't feel that way.
Who could have played that but him? I really don't. He just understood the correct level to take it to. I think that's why he was the greatest, is the greatest, because he's not afraid to go anywhere.
He
does whatever's necessary.
Right.
I mean, he's probably the best interpreter of screenplays ever. There's still some I haven't watched. The Fortune. I haven't watched. I have some glaring absences on my.
I always think it's crazy that he, Easy Rider, 5 Easy Pieces, Carnal Knowledge, Marvin Gardens, Last Detail, Chinatown, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And then he's like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah.
And I always, like, from 75 to, then there's
Going South.
Shining.
Yeah.
The Reds.
Right.
When is Going South?
78.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all right. That's
I
the one I'm
think.
missing.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm missing. But I mean, it's just a crazy run, a crazy career.
I actually had the impulse to watch Witches of Eastwick the other night. I think I'm gonna rent it, and because I haven't seen that one in so long, and I just feel like he's one of those that you can just get greatness out of him, and it can make any movie better.
He's one of the only, we talked about this when we did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's like he's done terrible things. He's a terrible person that, at the beginning of the movie says he did this awful thing that got him into jail. And somehow, like, because it's Jack Nicholson, he gets a pass.
He's a human being. He's probably the best at not at just, like, even if he has to play someone who's done despicable things, of just finding the truth within that and not letting that be what guides the character.
There's just such an inherent likability to him and a charm to him, like, and some of it is like, well, it's because he's the bad boy and everyone likes the bad boy.
Right. But it's interesting because you watch the documentary that Kubrick's wife made about The Shining.
Yeah.
And there's that moment when he meets James Mason and he's like, hey, how's it going? Nice to meet you. Like, I mean, you really see, like, oh, wait, this guy's, like, actually a really, like, humble dude when it comes to his craft. Like, he's so great at it. But when he meets someone that was iconic, because, I mean, Bigger Than Life, that was, James Mason in Bigger Than Life, that was, like, predecessor to Spacey in American Beauty, Nicholson in One Flew Over the, in 5 Easy Pieces. I feel like exposing the cracks in the surface of the American male, and it was just kind of cool to see him in that light because you don't think of him like that.
Well, and he's such a. You see a real generosity to him. Like there's a documentary about Roger Corman, and they interview him, and there's this real moment where he starts crying thinking about it, and he's like, I always thought that because I started with him, he pretty much made me what I was, and then I got this career and I went off, and I always got the impression that he thought that, like, I wouldn't return.
He was too good for a
right.
movie.
I wouldn't return a favor. I wouldn't do anything for him just because of where I'm at now, and that makes me sad. And you see it in his eyes. Chinatown.
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect film.
It is. One of the best ever. It could be in contention for best film of all time. You could make the case. You could definitely argue for it.
I'd be for that. All right. So I hope that you are liking. So this is the second episode. I hope that you're enjoying it. I'll speak for myself. I want this in-depth discussion that we're having. To have an effect if you like these movies, if you like movies, and if you are a filmmaker or an artist and you want to get into it, like, our discussions are supposed to be hopefully inspiring and kind of shed new light on these films because they mean so much to us. We're not critics, we're not film historians, but we do make a lot of stuff. We love, Devon likes acting, he's a musician. I like making movies, so, these are the films that influence us and matter to us, and hopefully our discussions shine light on why that is. And that's what I think of as the mission for our show. If there's anything you wanted to add.
I mean, I've just always loved movies, and from an early age, loved to learn about life and the world and people from watching them. And it really is it became the modern way of storytelling. And I love to try to let them speak to me and learn things that I can then discuss with someone like this. We can each learn from each other, and then, yeah, I mean, it's all about learning, in my opinion. So we learn something different every time we watch a new movie or rewatch something that we've seen a bunch of times, you know?
Amen. All right. Thank you very much. Next week we're going to be doing Lawrence of Arabia.
Yes.
And hopefully Tim Bridge will be sitting right here as our first guest. I love being here.
Me too.
All right. I'm David Metzger.
I'm Devon Ewalt.
Take care.